Hi, I want to do a short lesson on how to play that song that you just heard me play, which is Hey Ya by Outkast. Some of you may recognize it. And the lesson is really aimed at both beginners and intermediate students. So I'm going to want to try and cover how to read chord diagrams, how to read tablature, how to finger the chords with the left hand in such a way so that you don't have muted notes or buzz notes, how to transition from one chord to the next quickly so that you can get to the next chord in time, and also the right hand, some of the rhythm aspects and strumming to play the song. So without further ado, I'm going to switch over to a screen recording that I made, and we'll talk about chord diagrams and the fingerings and how to read the tabs. Okay, so here we have the first chord in Hey Ya. The diagram basically works this way. Strings are the vertical lines, so we have the first string, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth strings, and then we have the frets, first fret, second fret, third fret, and fourth fret. They're the horizontal lines. Across the top you have the fingering numbers. The zeros represent unfingered strings or open strings. And then we also have the dots on specific string and fret locations, and the numbers tell you which finger. For instance, this dot right here is at the third fret of the sixth string, fingered by the second finger of your left hand, or if you're a left-handed player, it would be your right hand. And then this would be the second fret of the fifth string. That would be fingered with your index or first finger. The fourth string would be open, the third string would be open. Then we would have the third finger on the third fret of the second string, and we would have the fourth finger on the third fret of the first string. This, by the way, is not the G chord that people are traditionally first shown when they start guitar. Usually they're shown this chord, okay, which has just a slightly different fingering at the very top. So these two notes are the same as the other one, but instead of having the third finger on the third fret of the second string, we have the third finger on the third fret of the first string, and we don't use the fourth finger. The same is actually the case for the C chord in Hey Ya. This is the type of open C chord that people are usually shown initially when they start guitar. We have the sixth string, which has an X over it. That means that we don't play the string at all. We have the third finger at the third fret of the fifth string, the second finger at the second fret of the fourth string. We have the third string played open. We have the index finger or first finger at the first fret of the second string, and then we have the first string played open. Hey Ya is different in that while we have all of the notes, the fingerings that we talked about in the other chord fingering, other version of C, we also add the fourth finger to the third fret of the first string. And in that, it is the same as this version of the G chord. We also have the fourth finger here. So when we transition, when we move from this chord to this chord, we'll want to leave the fourth finger where it is. We don't want to pick it up because we'll just have to put it back again. Okay, so that's the G and the C chord. We also have two other chords in Hey Ya. We have the open D chord, which has the sixth string and the fifth string X'd, so we're not going to strum those at all. We have the fourth string played open. We have the first finger at the second fret of the third string, the third finger at the third fret of the second string, and we have the second finger at the second fret of the first string. And then finally, we have the last chord, which is E minor. All 6 strings are played. The 6th string is open. The first finger holds down the 2nd fret of the 5th string. The second finger holds down the 2nd fret of the 4th string. And then strings 3, 2, and 1 are all open. So that's E minor. Now what I'd like to talk a little bit about is the tablature, or the tab staff, which is right down here. These graphics, by the way, in this video will be downloadable at a link that I'm going to put right below the video player. So when you click on the demo lesson page, you'll be able to download these as PDF files, both this and that one. All you have to do is go to guitarlessonsincolumbia.com, and you can watch the videos there, or you can watch them on YouTube, of course, but you can also download these two PDF files that show the music at my website. So if you're new to tab, the way tablature works, it's a 6-line staff where the lines represent the strings. So this top line is supposed to represent the 1st string, and then we go 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And tablature only shows the fret locations on the strings. It does not show the fingerings like the chord diagram does. So what we see here is the 3rd fret of the 6th string, the 2nd fret of the 5th string, the open 4th, the open 3rd, the 3rd fret of the 2nd, and the 3rd fret of the 1st. And I've gone ahead and put the tabbed version of all 4 chords in. If you find it easier to sort of get a grip on the information that way, you can certainly look at the tabs. And then this is the staff, and on the staff I have the rhythm of the strumming marked in. So it's not so important right now that we spend time talking about how to count these rhythms or what these are. What's really important is that I explain what this is. So if you caught it at the beginning when I was playing through the song, there's this kind of a smacking sound that I make with my right hand where I kind of wrap my knuckles down on the strings, and that's what this is representing right here. So this is this kind of smack that you do. And after I've finished talking about how to read all of this stuff, I'm going to switch over and talk about first the left hand, and then we'll talk about the right hand. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about first the left hand issues involved with fingering open chords. There are really 2 things that students who are just starting out with this have to sort of contend with. When you first finger a chord, apart from memorizing where the fingerings are, because that's pretty important to get there quickly and easily, one of the things that you may notice if you play the chord one note at a time, you might hear this sound, or maybe that sound. So the first sound was a mute, and the second sound was a buzz, and there really are only 2 causes for mutes or buzzed notes. One cause is a finger that might be holding down a note might not be applying enough pressure, so you could get a mute that way, or if it's in the wrong place on the fret, if it's on top of the fret, for instance, it can be muted, or if you fingered too far back towards the headstock, this is the headstock, you can get a buzzing sound. That's actually the string bouncing on the fret. So the best place to position your finger is right up behind the fret. Up is this way towards the body. And when I say up, I'm talking about pitch, because as we move in the direction of the body, you can hear the pitch go up. So higher in the fret means towards the body. Okay? So that's one possible cause. The finger that's actually holding down a note can be the cause of a buzz note or a mute, but also a finger that's holding down a note next to an adjacent string. Right now I'm playing my 4th string, and because I have not arched my first finger sufficiently to clear that 4th string, I'm actually touching it with this part of my finger. And if I touch the string, it's not going to ring out. It's going to be muted. So the solution to that is to get your finger up on the fingertip so that you can clear that string. So the first thing you want to do when you finger a brand new chord, or if you're fingering chords for the very first time, is to go through and make sure that you check for these things. And if you hear it, apply one of those solutions. Either try to change the position of your finger so that you're in the right place in the fret, or you're holding down with enough force, or get your finger more up on its fingertip so that you can keep it clear of any adjacent strings. And that will get you the results you want so that the notes of the chord will ring out. So we would want to do that with all 4 chords in Hey Ya. The next thing that you're going to contend with, especially if you're doing this for the first time, is when we do the transitions, when people first do chords, a lot of times what I usually see, or most of the time what I usually see with my own students, is a tendency to assemble the chord one fingering at a time. So they'll put this finger down, and then they'll put that finger down, and then they'll put the 3rd finger and the 4th finger. And then when they go to the next chord, after they're done strumming the first chord, they'll do the next chord the same way. So maybe they'll put the 3rd finger down, and then the 2nd and the 1st and the 4th. And the problem with this is it's just too slow. And so what happens is you wind up with something like this. Assuming that you've got the right hand worked out, what you're going to get is this. You see, it just doesn't sound right. It's taking me too long. I have to stop at the end of the measure right before the chord transition and finger the chord one fingering at a time, and it means an extra pause in the music that really doesn't belong there. So what we want to do is we want to first look for any common fingerings. And I talked a little bit about this in the last clip with the picture, the graphic of the chord diagrams. There is a common fingering between the first 2 chords in Hey Ya. We have a common fingering between the G and the C. You may have noticed that this finger stayed where it was. Okay? So let me do that one more time. Here's the G, and my 4th finger is just going to stay right down on the 3rd fret of the 1st string, and then I'm going to move my other fingers into place. And I think I said before, if you lift it, you're just going to wind up having to put it right back. So there really is no point in lifting a common fingering, and that will save you some time. The other thing that will save you some time is looking for common shapes between groups of fingers. So what I'm talking about here would be similarities. So for instance, if I just have you focus on what 2 and 1 do in the G chord, you can see they're a string apart and they're a fret apart. And if you look at what they do in the C chord, this is a similar shape. It's not exactly the same. You can see between 1 and 2 I have the open 3rd string. But it's similar. It's a fret apart. And so when I move from this G chord, that's the complete version, when I move from here, I want to try and get 2 and 1 to move in a uniform direction and almost at a uniform speed. I'm going to want to move 1 just a little bit faster so it goes a little further, and gets to the second string at the same time as my second finger gets to the fourth string. And that's very important. We want to leave at the same time and arrive at the same time. Okay? That's sort of the easy part. You would practice this motion with just the two fingers, 2 and 1 moving back and forth between their locations in the G chord and their locations in the C chord. The next thing we would want to do is focus on another pair of fingerings. For instance, we could do 1 and 3. Okay, so this is a little bit harder because now the fingers are going to go in opposite directions. When I move from the G chord to the C, my first finger is going to go that way, and my third finger is going to go that way. So they're kind of moving like this. So I'm going to want to practice that, maybe even a little bit more than the first combination because it is just harder. But again, the same rules apply. We leave at the same time, and then we arrive at the same time. Now, one thing you can do if you're really, really struggling with this, and some people have some trouble with this initially, especially beginners, is you can finger the chord and try this simple exercise. Just lift the chord, see if you can hold your fingers in that shape, and then put your fingers right back where they were. All right, because the key to transitioning from one fingering to another, I think, is to be able to first hold a fingering. Okay, so that's all I'm doing. I'm taking a chord like G or C, and I'm going to try and keep my fingers in that shape and lift my fingers off the neck and then replace them, put them all back. And if your fingers deform as you lift off and they kind of come back down in the wrong places, then you need to practice holding the form. Okay? But then after that, you can try the other steps which we talked about a minute or so ago. Okay, so that basically covers the transition from G to C. Now I want to talk a little bit about some of the details with the transition from C to D. So this is the C, this is the D. Probably the first thing that I would look at is what to do with the first and second fingers. So I'm going to be going from this shape in C to this shape in the D. Okay, and just to review, in the C chord, 2 is on the 4th string at the 2nd fret, 1 is at the 1st fret of the 2nd string, and we're kind of twisting them around and bringing them into place so that 1 now is on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string and 2 is on the 2nd fret of the 1st string. And just like we were talking about pairs of fingerings when we transition from G to C, we want to leave at the same time and arrive at the same time. And once you get comfortable with that, then the next thing you want to do is maybe work on 3 and 1. So these two locations in C, and then we're going to try and bring them to the locations in the D, which would be 1 on the 3rd string at the 2nd fret and 3 on the 2nd string at the 3rd fret. Now, while you're doing all of this, you still have 4 on the 1st string. You're going to want to take that away as you move to the D chord. The last step of all is to work all 3 fingers, including taking away the 4th finger, and try to get them all to come down where they belong on the D chord. Okay, so the last transition between the D and the E minor is actually a fairly easy one. So we're going to just lift the 3rd finger, and we're not going to use it in the E minor, and we're going to take 2 and 1, and we're going to collapse them a little bit and then bring them into place so that the 1st finger goes to the 2nd fret of the 5th string and the 2nd finger goes to the 2nd fret of the 4th string. And again, just like before, try to get them to leave at the same time and arrive at the same time. so that you don't experience a pause when you transition. Okay? Okay, we've talked about the left hand. Now let's talk about the right hand. I'm going to tilt the camera down a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. And the first thing I want to talk about is that smacking sound that you hear. Basically, it's going to be with the backs of the knuckles, and you're just going to rap down on the strings like that. So it makes that kind of a sound. And the overall pattern, we're just going to do first on one chord, on the G chord. Basically consists of a downstroke, an upstroke, a smack, a downstroke, another upstroke, and a smack. Okay, let me do that one more time. So we have a downstroke, an upstroke, a smack, downstroke, upstroke, smack. Now that was out of rhythm, so we'll do it again in rhythm, but first I just want to point out that I'm playing with my fingers. So when I'm strumming down, I'm using basically the back part of my index finger and a little bit of my middle finger, and then when I strum up, I use the front portion. And you don't want to bear down too hard or dig in too hard, because if you do, you'll hang up on the strings. You just want to keep it light so that your fingers can go across the strings. By the way, you can do this with a pick. For those of you who've been playing for a little while and you'd like to use a pick, you can certainly do it that way. It would be exactly the same. You'd have a downstroke, an upstroke, a smack, downstroke, upstroke, smack. Okay? Let's try it in rhythm. Again, we're going to stay on the G chord, but we'll repeat a couple of measures. By the way, this pattern that we're doing with the downstrokes and the upstrokes and the smacking sound do not apply to the D chord. When we get to the D chord, we're just going to do 2 downstrokes for that. But the rhythm and the pattern that we're playing right now do apply to the G, the C, and the E minor. So let me count it off at a slow tempo now so you can hear how it sounds actually in rhythm. 1 and 2 and 3 and ready, play. Down, up, smack. 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 Smack. Okay? Now let's try it at a little faster tempo. 1 and 2 and 3 and go. And 1, up, smack. Down, 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 up, smack. Up, smack. Okay? So that would be a good way to begin with the right hand. Do it on one chord so you don't have to think about chord transitions and you can just focus on this. A good idea, if you have one, is to use a metronome and just gradually ratchet the tempo up. Maybe 5 numbers at a time. Of course, if you're not used to playing with a metronome, the first thing that you're going to want to try and do is learn how to stay with it. But that's really another lesson. What I want to talk about now is how to basically do the strumming and transition, or demonstrate and provide you with an example that you can sort of play along with. Okay, so let's start slowly at first. This time I'm just going to call out the chords, and hopefully you'll be able to keep up at this slower tempo. 1 and 2 and 3 and go. And down, up, smack, down, go to C, on C. Now we do the D and the E minor. Down, up, smack, down, up, smack. Now we're going to repeat back to G. Go to C. Stay on C. We do the D, 2 downstrokes, and the E minor. Repeat the E minor. Okay, so that's basically it. I just want to do one pass now through the whole thing up at tempo. So this is going to go pretty quick. You'll probably want to kind of work your way up to this over you know, a good period of time, gradually increasing the tempo. So here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and go in. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that lesson. I hope it was fun and informative. And again, if you would like to download the notation that you saw towards the beginning of the lesson, you can go to my website, guitarlessonsincolumbia.com, and click on the sample lesson page, and you'll find the link underneath the video player for the 2 Hey Ya graphics. Hope you liked it. Take care.